One of the things we haven't really touched on is how do you actually look up things in the database, and how do you do it outside of the context of a view? Like sometimes you might need to look up other things than just what's in the standard views that we've already done. Now to do that, we're going to actually jump into the Python shell inside of Django. So you have to do python manage.py shell to actually have Django manage the Python shell so we can import our related Django stuff. So I'm going to do from products.models. I'm going to import the product model. Okay, so I've got this import of product.models. I have the product model now. Well, if we go back into our views, remember how we had this query set here? Well, that query set we can actually take a look at on a little bit more of an in-depth level. So this is the query set itself. We type it out. We see what's coming on here. Now I can actually filter these things down. That is, I can make my query set a little bit smaller. So I can say QS equals to product.objects.filter. And if I'm going to filter it, I can filter the title. Let's say it contains shirt, the string of shirt. And we hit enter. What does that QS look like? It's literally just the shirts. I can do the same thing for hat, right? QS, it's going to have that same thing. I can do another field like description, and I can see what that's going to be. I can also just say product, something like that. What is that one? Nothing. None of those descriptions have product. It's actually better to use something called iContains than just contains, because it helps with the case sensitivity stuff. But we can really just try out all sorts of stuff like this, right? So there you go. We've got two products in that description of this. So how is it that we might chain these things together? That is, how do I have the description and title? How do I look both of those things up without having too much issue? Well, let's just tab or press up a little bit, and we've got title, iContains, hat. That's still that one. And I can actually add in or chain a filter here. So I can do description, iExact equals to ABC. And of course, this QS doesn't actually exist. So objects.filter is something that's really useful for us. And we can do it for any of our fields. So let's say, for instance, product.objects.filter, and we can say ID equals to 4, none. We've got none being an ID of 4. What if we did PK of 4? None. Right? So PK is not 4. We're not seeing anyone. We didn't actually create 4 of them. So if I did 3, what do I get? I actually have a list, a query set of items being 3. So I do suggest that you try this out. We are going to do a lot more stuff with query sets in the future, but this is generally how you look things up. Now you can do the same sort of concept with a get call. So we can do product.objects.get, and we can say ID equals to 3. And what do we get? We actually get that instance of that product instead of the query set. So that is a get lookup. But one of the challenges with the get lookups, if it doesn't exist, it raises an exception. So this is actually would be considered a server error if it tried to do this. That's why this shortcut exists, get object or 404. That actually handles that error. Another way to handle that error is to do a try block. So the same thing, we're going to do the same get call, and then we'll do except product.does not exist. We'll say print no product here. And then we can run a final exception saying print, And of course, if I run that, it does no product here. So this doing the model that does not exist actually handles doing the things that we need to do. So let's go ahead and grab this, and I'm going to bring it in this product detail view. And we're going to just change a little bit about the function-based view so you can have a better understanding of how these lookups work by doing some of these basic things. Okay, so we're going to set instance. We're going to tab this one out, and we'll just say instance equals to the ID that's being passed or the primary key that's being passed. Those, again, are interchangeable. So ID equals to PK and PK equals to ID. Those are interchangeable in this case. Yes, you can change them, but we're not going to worry about that right now. As in, you can change what the primary key is for you advanced users out there. But this is now a block that would make sense. It actually is closer to what this would be. In fact, if I imported one more thing, so from Django.http import HTTP 404, I can actually run my own thing. So if it doesn't exist, I can raise HTTP 404 saying product doesn't exist. Okay, so let's try that out and see what happens on that product detail view. So I'm going to actually have to I'm going to open up a new terminal window and have my shell still run so I can work with these things at the same time. I do this very often when I'm working in my own projects. Okay, so I'm running the server and I have my Python shell still here. So we go back into our project and I go to project or products 3, but I'm going to add in FPV. Function-based view is the same. It works. I change it to one that does not exist. I get that error, product doesn't exist, as in what I wrote here. This is now much closer to what this detail view looks like. Granted, it's actually doing the same thing as this get object or 404, but I'm able to handle what's going on here. So I can take this one step further and say QS, as in query set, equals to product.objects.all. And then I can actually filter down. So I can say filter ID equals to PK. And we'll say if QS.exists, that is, if that query set is there, if there's anything in it, and QS.count equals to 1, then we'll say instance equals to QS.first. I'll explain this in just a second, but bear with me for a second. Otherwise, we're going to raise that same product does not exist. I'll comment this try block out, and we'll go back into our product view. Notice it's doing the exact same thing. Everything about it is the same. So when you run a query set, this actually we can see what that query set is, right? So we print it out. I can see that, hey, what do you know? It's one item in there. So when I do something like count, that is counting the length of that query set. You're going to do this over doing something like length of query set. That is the Python length of a list, but query set has a method called count that's more efficient for the database to make sure it's there. Same with exists, both things. So if that query set's even there, then we've got what we need. Now really, I could probably just run if QS.count equals to 1, then this, otherwise it doesn't exist. What's nice about this is if I had, titles, like if I was looking up by a title and the same title was there multiple times, I could handle it here, right? But in this case, we are just going off of ID. We'll actually look at that multiple titles thing another time. But for now, that is generally what you're going to end up doing if you're wanting to circumvent this get object or 404. Now, this is important for lookups. It's just really how do we take this and go one step further and turn our list view into a search view? Those questions we still have to answer, but let's stay on this for a little bit longer and introduce the concept of model managers.